All right, welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. Rafai is saying it's just an exciting morning.
Adesoa Omorwan.
And I'm Shaito Atigari. Good morning.
All right. I mean, there are lots and lots of issues to discuss, but we're going to go straight to it. I mean, we're supposed to have somebody here, but we're not discussing that now. But the recent matter, the Sex for Grade documentary, is something very, very, very out there. It's on the loose. Lots of people have various comments as regards it. There are different possibilities. What could have happened? What didn't happen? And all of that. But we know definitely that this morning we're going to be talking to an integral part of the Sex for Grades scandal. And it's an exclusive today.
Yes, so. Indeed. In an exclusive investigation, undercover investigation, Africa Eye reveals proof of sexual harassment at some West Africa's top universities. During the year-long investigation, journalists who posed as students made secret recordings of male academic lecturers who harass and abuse young women.
And as a result of numerous public requests to investigate Sex for Grades, African Eye decided to look further into the problem. Two of West Africa's most prestigious universities were investigated: University of Lagos, Unilag, and the University of Ghana, Legon. Sex for Grade reveals how lecturers who can make or break their academic careers grooms victims into academic settings, abusing their power to try to get what they want.
The documentary, which features the personal story of Kiki Mordi, tells the story of a vibrant young girl whose dream of becoming a doctor was shattered because of her refusal to have sex with the lecturer.
Sexual harassment is a problem which plagues most university campuses in West Africa and many countries around the world, but it's almost never proven publicly. And joining us now, as Rafai said, for a further chat on this is Kiki Mordi herself. She joins us from our Abuja studios. Hello, Kiki. Thank you so much for joining us on the Arise breakfast show this morning. And let me begin by commending you for what you've done. Every reporter has an objective before setting out to do a report, and with yours, of course, you had your objectives. But let me ask you if you are satisfied. Has your objective or your objectives been met so far?
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, some of the objectives that we hope to achieve was to tell the world how bad the problem of sexual harassment in universities really is. And I believe a lot of people now understand the scale. And yeah, that's one of the objectives. The conversation going on around the world, around Africa, around Nigeria, around West Africa, is also another objective of mine that I believe has happened.
Very exciting one, Kiki. Your documentary. I mean, many questions come to mind. Number one, there's a case of, you said in your documentary, you did, take a swipe at other lecturers too. You can correct me if I'm wrong, or was it only the two lecturers you narrowed down on? The other lecturers that didn't fall for this braid, how about, projecting them too? Because a lot of people argue with you that you don't have all bad eggs in the Nigerian university system. And secondly, African Eye has been doing a lot of great work as regards, putting ills in society out there. Another question for you, Kiki, is there going to be a follow-up to this? Because that's not all. And there's some, very deep areas that we can never get to that African Eye can help us get to. Is there more? What's your media channel doing as regards this?
Before I answer that, I want to correct something. You said there are lecturers who didn't fall prey. We didn't try to entrap anybody, in case that's what you're suggesting. No, we did not. We had an enormous amount of evidence against the said institutions and individuals that we ended up investigating. We spoke to a number of current and past students. We had recordings, we had screenshots, and we determined the pattern when it comes to grooming and harassment, and then we decided to go in and uncover this. So yes, these are the people that eventually made it into the film. I wouldn't say that we tried to get anybody and they didn't fall prey. That's not our mode of operation. We don't randomly select people to investigate. We do our research properly and intensely, and then go in to uncover the truth. As regards what next, again, I said one of our objectives was to have this conversation. We've all known that sexual harassment in Nigerian universities and, West African universities is a huge problem, but we never really understood the scale of it. And now that we understand the scale of it, we know that it's not the duty of one person to actually bring the full scale of it to light. Everyone has a role to play, especially the media and journalists, in uncovering this huge cankerworm that is eating into our society. Africa Eye is an investigative unit of BBC, and we definitely, the team definitely will keep on doing investigations in Africa, and there'll be more investigations, definitely. I can't say for a fact about the case of sex for grades, but I always say, we can't leave it to just one team. It's a huge continent and a huge problem, and everyone has a role to play.
Okay, so looking at the nature of this documentary, Sex for Grades, a lot of the filming had to be done in close proximity with some of these lecturers that were cut down, and some would argue that it infringes on their privacy. And what are the legal implications for this when it comes to privacy laws in airing this documentary for the BBC?
Well, it's important for me to reiterate that we did a really thorough job, legally, professionally, and otherwise. We had a lot of evidence, prima facie evidence, that we collected that granted us permission to actually go in there to, for the greater good, uncover the amount of rot that happened in these institutions. Usually, as regards journalism and the media, when it comes to sexual harassment in Nigeria, we know how it goes. A person comes out to say she's been sexually harassed, and she has a media trial, going on for months and months, and her life is more or less ruined. We had a duty to sort of look for another way to put the focus on the perpetrator, and which is exactly what we did, and which is exactly why we did what we did. So gathering the amount of evidence, humongous, I must say, shocking as well, the amount of evidence that we were able to gather on these institutions and these individuals granted us permission to actually go in there to uncover for ourselves the harassment, the grooming, everything that goes on, and bring it to light.
And let's talk about the reactions so far, Kiki. When you see reactions such as grades for sex also exist, that is, the female students as willing participants and initiators of this act, or that of Professor Gampo in Ghana, who says that it's a bogus, who dismisses the documentary and says it's a bogus documentary and a setup. How does it make you feel?
Well, I mean, I don't feel any type of way. I do know that with every form of corruption, there is always the giver and the taker. But in the case of university sexual harassment, we know where all the power lies, and we were hoping that we would be able to bring to light how it plays out from the eyes of the student. This is a person who has little or no power. If a student offers a lecturer who has been put in charge of education, who has been put in charge of a lot of things, sex in exchange for grades, it's the onus of rejecting that lies on the lecturer. And the lecturer rejecting that advancement has no implications whatsoever. As a matter of fact, he has a duty to report that student, for trying to offer sex for grades. And, he doesn't get to be victimized by the system for doing that because he holds most of the authority. And so it's I don't understand why the conversation comes up most times, because we are uncovering the rot of where one person has a huge amount of authority and abuses that authority.
Right.
As regards to the other comments regarding the documentary, I mean, I have no comments. Again, we've done the work. The conversation has started, and it's beyond me right now. It's no longer about me or my team. It's about us as Nigerians getting rid of this problem. Okay.
Kiki, still on the conversation. I mean, Professor Gampo in Ghana, a very popular professor. In fact, did come out here in another interview that he granted a Ghanaian channel, Joy News. He did say that it was by his political detractors. Yes. He said that your media organization connived with his political detractors because he's outwardly very fervent in speaking against corrupt politicians in Ghana. What would you like to say to that? Secondly, has there been, contact between you and the University of Lagos after this has come out? Your institution and the University of Lagos also, is there a possibility of you triggering the Freedom of Information Bill to get more information about things that are currently going on?
That's a very important question. The Freedom of Information Act is one that has been in conversation for decades, even before I dreamt of becoming a journalist. And I'm hoping that we get it right. We're thorough about what is contained in that bill, and we get it right so that, because it's a human right, we deserve to know what exactly is going on. Regarding being in conversations with the university, before we put out the content, before we put out the material, we reached out to the university to tell them that this is what we found. And the comments were published in the film. The full film is, of course, available on YouTube to see what the reactions of the universities towards what we put out were. They mostly dismissed, they mostly stood against sexual harassment. They disassociated themselves from the professors, and they said they would take a stand. They didn't make any comments, though, for structures like the cold room and the rest of that. But so far, so good. No, the conversation hasn't been back and forth between me and the universities, but I'm hoping that the conversation goes beyond. Again, like I said, it's beyond us right now. I'm hoping that the conversation goes between the institutions and the federal government, just so that we have a clear case of we are doing something about the problem and not just saying something about the problem. And when it comes to Professor Jampo, unfortunately, it's untrue. Again, I have to reiterate that we gathered a lot of evidence. This wasn't a documentary that was filmed for the sake of it. There is a lot of evidence, and we stand by our evidence.
Okay, Kiki, I want to take the conversation back to the people who really matter here. And those are some of these girls who were harassed and who have had to drop out of school because of this. Is there anything being done, any structure put in place for them to deal with this psychologically, clinically, on different levels? You said that you championed this because you had gone through it personally. But before you answer that question, we're going to go on a quick break, and then when we come back, I would like to hear a response on that. Welcome back to the morning show. We're still joined by Kiki Mordi, a BBC journalist who unraveled the Sex for Grades documentary that has been making the rounds. Now, before the break, Kiki, I was asking about if there's any structure that has been put in place to help these girls who have, been at the mercy of some of these lecturers get over this issue mentally, psychologically. You said yourself that you championed this cause because of what you went through. And I'm sure in your position, there would have been something that you would have loved for an organization to put together. Are you working with any NGOs? What's being done besides the documentary for these girls?
Yes, this is an important conversation because it took a long time for me personally to deal with what I went through. And the school, beyond asking people to come out to report, these schools, these institutions and these universities, beyond asking people to come out and report, it's very important that structure is put in place for the well-being, for the mental well-being of these women and these ladies. We've been working with close contact with Stand to End Rape. They have been they've been really amazing with helping with counseling, to people who are coming out to speak their truth, because it can't be easy. It's honestly such a huge thing to come out and talk about. I know how long it took me to even openly talk about my own personal sexual harassment problems. But yes, Stand to End Rape is one organization, and with the volume or with the scale of what this problem is, one person can't take it all. So, at the federal level, there needs to be structures put in place. At the university levels, there need to be structures put in place. And of course, more non-governmental organizations, the conversation has spread through them, and they are offering their services as well.
Kiki, since we're talking about how this inspired you, this is not to bring up a hurtful past, but let's talk about you. You've done this commendable expose. Lecturers are being investigated or suspended, schools have been mentioned, but still Kiki Mordi withholds the name of her school and the lecturer who made her drop out from medical school. While we can hazard some guess as to why, I'm sure there are a lot of people who wonder and who want to know. So why is Kiki Mordi still withholding the name of her school and the lecturer?
Because it's my story, and within my own time, I definitely will tell it. It's what I'll tell other people that are coming out to tell their stories. People have come to Twitter to tweet about their experiences, but they have withheld the name of the lecturers because you can't just without proof name lecturers. And people have been pressuring them to name their lecturers. And I tell them to, ease off a little bit, because you will come to this with your own time, within your own time, within your own space, using the tools that you know how well to work with. You will come to that conclusion. All I know is this is my story, and I know better. I have skills as an investigative journalist right now, and I'll tell my story within my own time.
Kiki, I mean, like Adisa was started, I want to talk to you as a human being now, not the journalist, not the person trying to, set society straight. But I want to talk to you as a person. Kiki, have you healed? And how did you heal?
Healing is a journey, and I know that there is still chance for more healing. But honestly, the first phase of healing for me was coming to terms that this harassment actually happened to me. Because for a very long time, I denied it. I denied myself dealing with this problem. I tried to pretend it didn't exist, occupied myself with work as much as possible. But admitting to myself, saying my story out loud, was a huge step for me, because I hadn't even said it out loud. I mean, I'd spoken to my mom about it, but I didn't give her the details. I just told her that I was being harassed, and she asked me to come home. So telling my story out loud is a landmark for me. Is a landmark for me in my journey towards healing. And yes, I'm doing very well. I have a really supportive team that have been empathetic towards the whole situation. They prioritize my safety and my mental health. And it has been such an amazing journey where I can talk about my story without breaking down in tears. And I know how hard it is to come to that place. And so I don't take it for granted.
Another thing I'd like to ask is, what became of those dreams? Would you still go back to them? You dreamt of being a medical doctor at some point. What became of your education? What became of your education? Did you still
well, my education, unfortunately, my tertiary education, unfortunately, was thrown out the window. I was robbed of my dreams of becoming a scientist or a medical doctor at any point in my life. And I had to go back with nothing. And I mean, I found the media, I found radio, and that was my solace, my safe space for a very long time, because it provided me with a voice. Prior to my first ever radio job, I was a person who didn't have a voice, who didn't feel like the world wanted to listen to me. And so in many ways, radio saved my life. And then I found myself in other parts of the media, and now investigative journalism, where I can use my skills to be able to speak up for a number of girls, not just myself, a number of women out there who've been suffering in silence.
Right.
Kiki, let's go back to the documentary. This was almost 1 year of work put into it by yourself and your team. Were there moments when you thought this was not worth it, this had to stop? What was the most challenging for you in the course of this 1 year?
So many parts of it was challenging. It was honestly the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. I spoke with victims who would break down in my arms and really cry, and I just would see myself in them at so many points. And that part was really hard for me. And then actually going into the space, actually going in there, was a reminder that these structures that have been in existence for years are still in existence, and no one is doing anything about it. At many points during our investigation, I'll just see patterns repeat themselves. That was really hard for me. But at no point did I think that it wasn't worth it. As if anything, it was an indication that you have to keep going. I guess it was that passion that fueled me in the time where I was left wanting. I was left empty and in need of a drive or in need of energy. It was the passion to actually go through with this, not just as a journalist, but as a person who believes that we need to do something about the problem of sexual harassment in our society.
You know, you have mentioned the victims, and I'd just like to draw your attention to a spin-off of the documentary that was done by another journalist, Adesua Oyenokoye. And one thing that she said was, even when she went back to the university, a lot of girls still would not come out and and speak against their oppressors. What would you say to that young girl who is watching you now on TV, who has watched your documentary but still doesn't have the courage to step forward and tell her story? What would you say to her?
I'd say to her that I don't have the courage either, right? But with all of us together coming to speak in one voice, there is strength in that unity. And from that strength, we can find courage together. And she doesn't have to suffer in silence. I know what it feels like to feel alone and to not have anyone be in your side, in your corner. And right now, we're in your corner. The conversation has gone global. So the world is in your corner. There's some parts of the world that would try to threaten you and make you feel scared. But in all honesty, they're the ones that are afraid, and they're trying to transfer that fear to you. And we can't let them do that.
Kiki, the place, cold room, and if you can surmise that as a word, has become a metaphor for how stone cold a lot of people, a lot of young ladies out there feel. What can be done to heal these hearts? Because there are millions of them. You talked about your mental health, very important. I don't see enough psychologists talking to people. I mean, what can be done? If it's a cause, how can we champion it? I like the fact that it's in public glare, but a lot of people say it will just trend for a couple of days and it'll be all over. Just like some story trended and Big Brother came and it was all over.
I hope this doesn't end. I honestly, truly hope this doesn't end. But I believe that it won't end because I'm inspired by the young women I see speaking up these days. I didn't even have their strength or their courage when I was 19, and I see 19-year-olds coming out to speak up. I was at a screening at a university, and some girls came up to me and they couldn't have been more than 19, 20, and their courage is inspiring. I mean, they think that I inspire them, but in all honesty, they inspire me. And we all need to speak about it, and it's okay to ask for help. You know what? We haven't figured it all out yet as a country. Our mental health facilities are not at par with international standards. Sometimes some would even say the same thing for our educational system. And we require help. We need help. And it's okay to ask now that everyone, international organizations, local organizations, we all pool our resources together to be there for our girls. We can't, as a society, boast of being a sovereign state, or boast of being a democracy, or boast of being a good nation, good people, great nation, when our girls are damaged and suffering and there is no help available to them. We need to keep talking about it, but beyond talking, we need to actually do something. We need to hold our leaders accountable for how well they take care of our education and our mental health. And we need to hold them accountable now. The press has a role to play, and we need to also fight for the press to actually have their voice. There's been stifling in various places. I know journalists that have been jailed and, for doing their jobs. But we need to actually fight for the rights for informed decisions as Nigerians to be made. And we can't have that without journalists doing their jobs. And we actually have people that we've elected into positions. We have senators. We have these people that we've put there to look out for us. And it's their job. If they fail at their job, it is our duty, it's our right, in fact, to hold them accountable. So we all need to do what we need to do. The non-governmental organizations have a role to play. The government has a role to play. We as a people need to collectively heal and be there for each other.
Indeed. Kiki, we've talked about reactions earlier, but I wanted to ask you what you feel about the reactions from the institutions so far, not the lecturers themselves or the victims or those you spoke to, but as an institution. I remember the University of Lagos was quick to say they do have a policy, but I wonder what you think about that. Is it just another knee-jerk approach? And we'll talk about the reaction from the government, but I do understand that we'll have to go on a break very soon. So I want you to ponder about that, the reaction so far from the country and the institutions themselves. Does it look like something that we can, solve? Has this come to stay, or do we need another Kiki Mordi in a couple of years to do another expose, and then we're talking about it all over again? Stay with us, Kiki Mordi. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us. You're watching the Arise Morning Show. Still with us from our Abuja studio is Kiki Mordi, the BBC reporter. Thank you so much, Kiki, for staying with us. There's so much a journalist can
Thank
do.
you for having
I
me.
mean, you've told the story, the conversations have started. But beyond that, what would you like to see happen? Because, again, this is not new. We all pass through the university system in Nigeria, and we do know that this is not a new social ill. But do you think it's another knee-jerk approach? I mean, the National Assembly is reintroducing the sexual harassment bill. But tell me about what you think about the reactions of the institutions, University of Lagos, University of Ghana, and of course the Nigerian government.
I think I would like to see the political will from these universities to actually solve a problem. They do have a sexual harassment policy. The one of UNILAG only got published in August this year, and the one of Ghana had been in existence for quite longer. And they have, of course, dissociated themselves from sexual harassment as much as possible. But it's not just about these two individuals in each of these institutions. It's a lot more. I mean, I want to see more reactions, not just from the institutions that have been named, but from institutions across, especially my country here in Nigeria, because we know how bad it is. You know, people would say if you throw a stone and whatever university it lands, you would find sexual harassment there. That's how bad it is. And so we shouldn't wait for an undercover operative to record wrongdoing on camera. We don't have to wait for it to happen. We now understand, we now know that this is a problem of a very ridiculous scale. We need to all look inwards. All right, so far so good. The response on paper has been amazing, but I still think more needs to be done. More needs to be done. We need to see action. We don't need to hear rhetorics anymore. We hear that the sexual harassment bill is going back. I think we need to examine the details of that bill to make sure that at every point a student is being protected at all points. Because when a teacher reports a student for exam malpractice, for example, there is no portion of the law that victimizes the lecturer at any point. You report, you report. If you can prove, you can prove. If you can't prove, you're not victimized. And we know how hard sexual harassment is to prove. So I want to see at the federal level, not just at the institutional level, at the federal level, a sexual harassment policy that forces, that compels every institution in Nigeria, not just the universities, you know, the polytechnics, the state universities, the private ones as well, and down to the secondary level, that compels them to have at least the base level tolerance, like little or no tolerance for sexual harassment. And they should be held accountable if they fail to adhere to their own sexual harassment policies. And this is not to say the institutions cannot have an even more comprehensive sexual harassment policy, but at the base level, the federal government, realizing that this is such an epidemic, has a duty right now to actually implement a national sexual harassment policy.
You know, speaking about practical solutions, the First Lady of Ekiti State, Bisi Fayemi, made a comment during the exclusive screening of the Sex for Grace documentary, where she said, first off, that she had also suffered the same harassments during her time in university. But she also made a very interesting solution, talking about a robust sex offenders list, where it's made public for everybody that has been accused and proven guilty of the offense of sexual crime. There's a place where all their names are put so that they don't, you know, they are shamed publicly and they don't go and repeat these evil acts somewhere else in case they happen to relocate. Do you think that this in itself is a practical solution?
It's an ideal solution, because take for Dr. Boniface Igbenehu, for example. He didn't just start teaching at UNILAG. He has had experiences in University of Benin and a couple of other another university before UNILAG, and we find out that perpetrators are recycled into the system. You know, in the course of doing this investigation, I came across various shocking stories of lecturers who have been fired from one university and employed by another university. I mean, part of the federal sexual harassment policy should definitely include universities, you know, looking into the lecturers they want to hire. If a lecturer has been adjudged to be a sexual harasser or a sexual abuser, he should be named and his record be out there in the open and accessible to everyone. And such that if he's going to find employment in a space where he has to be in charge of young women, you know, we have to think twice before employing him and recycling him back into the system. Because it doesn't make any sense to fire one lecturer from one university for doing something wrong. This girl is damaged, his victims are damaged, and he goes on to another place in another part of the country to further damage young women. I support and I applaud that solution.
Right, Kiki, real quickly, let's talk about the laws. Some people are arguing that the laws are not even strong enough. Like, take for instance the sexual offenders bill being pushed. We hear the penalties for first offenders 500,000 naira.
Yes.
Somebody in high place can, people in high place can just pay that money and go like that. There was a lawyer, I forget her name now, that was saying that the penalty should be like 5 million naira. What would you say about the laws not even being hard enough on these people? Because if you say, and that law is passed and they say first offender 500,000 naira, how far is that going to go?
Yeah. I mean, I often say we need stricter policies. At Bayes University, where we had a screening as well, I did mention that we need stricter policies because you have to look at the wide spectrum of people who sexually harass and abuse their students in school. You know, some of them have to think twice about how this would gravely affect their career. And while it may not completely eradicate, it would drastically reduce the amount of lecturers who engage. You think about it, you know, the risks, you weigh the risk, and if I end up going to rope this girl, I may spend a number of years in jail. I may not be able to get employed in the educational sector again when I'm out. And you think about these consequences, and it deters you from actually going out there to sexually harass these young women. As a matter of fact, the lack of strict punishments for people who do this and the impunity culture is part of the reason it still festers up until this moment. So yes, we need stricter laws.
Well, Kiki, you know, they say the reward for hard work is more work. I know you've been doing a lot of media rounds, but what has life been like since this documentary was released?
We are currently working. I know people don't see that. That's the beautiful thing about this job is that when it's out, you see the work and you don't see the months of labor. So actually back to work. Also, I know how difficult it has been to sort of exist right now that, you know, the attention on me is bigger than it was even just as far back as a week ago. It's something that I have learned to manage, but it doesn't stop me. It doesn't stop me from doing what I need to do.
Right, Kiki, another question comes to mind. What has been the impact of this documentary on your family that knows your story? The impact of this documentary on your family, like your mother, for instance, that know your story. Has it been? And just something easy and light. How are your cats?
My cats are fine. I miss them so much. I've been on the road so much and I haven't gotten to spend time with them. But yes, on my family, I think they now have introspection on what exactly I was going through at the time. A lot of things now make sense. My mom is really proud of me, and that makes me so warm and so happy. She lets me know every day how proud she is of me, and she tells me that my dad would be proud wherever he is right now. And my family, they've been really supportive at this time. They know that, I mean, they've always known that I've had this fire burning inside of me, and it's, I guess, beautiful to watch it unfold.
Well, thank you very much. We also share in their feelings. Thank you. This was a great job you did. We look forward to more work from you, hopefully in the nearest future. And a big thank you to you and your team. Kiki Mordi speaking to us in the last couple of minutes on the Sex for Grades expose done by the BBC Africa. Well, that brings us to the end of the show today. I am Desoa Omoro.
Yes, it has. Thank you for watching. From our entire team here in Lagos, enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.